The abandoned house in the Shadow Valley. In the heart of the Northern California forests, where giant trees blocked the moonlight, there was an abandoned old house known to the local population as the House of the Passing of the Spirit. The house was dilapidated. The wind sneaks between its broken walls, surrounded by an atmosphere of dread and deadly silence. The story dates back to 1923, when the Blackmore family moved to this house. They were a young couple, Edward and Margaret Blackmore, and their young daughter, Elizabeth. Everything looked normal at first, but it wasn't long until things started taking a strange turn. On the first night, Edward heard the sound of heavy steps roaming on the upper floor. The sound was clear, but when he lost the place, he found nothing. Margaret felt a sudden cold around the house, although the heater was burning. As for Elizabeth, she was talking to an invisible person, and when her mother asked her about it, the girl replied innocence. "She is the sad lady who cries every night in my room." Strange phenomena worsened. The doors are closed on their own. The lamps glowed and then extinguished, and the screaming, crying sounds were hesitating around the house at midnight. But real terror began when Margaret found an old message hidden under the floorboards in the main bedroom. The message was written in a trembling line, her words screaming desperate. "He is here. He is watching me. I will not let him take me as they all took them. If you read this, run away now, before it is too late." The family realized that there is a dark secret surrounding the house. By searching in the city's records, Edward discovered that the house was the property of a man named Jonathan Wilcox, a doctor known for his bad reputation. Wilcox was accused of horrific experiments on patients, and when the population revealed his matter, he disappeared in a mysterious way, leaving his house to swallow time. That night, the storms intensified, and electricity was cut off from the house. The family woke up to the sound of terrifying screaming from the Elizabeth room. They rushed to her, to find the room soaked in complete darkness, and the girl is sitting in the corner of the room, staring in a space with two eyes. She muttered in a faint voice, "It is here, to take us." Then she referred to the door of the room. At the same moment, the door opened violently, and cold winds rushed to hold something invisible. The effects of black hands stretching on the walls appeared slowly, and echoed malicious whispers began to fill the place. Edward carried his daughter, caught Margaret with a manual lamp, and ran towards the main door. But the mysterious force did not intend to leave them. The walls of the house began to vibrate, and the furniture is shattered on its own. They felt a cold breath touching their skins, and they saw a long black shadow standing at the top of the stairs. His eyes glow with a frightening red flash. Margaret shivered as she felt that something was approaching her, but Edward managed to open the door and pushed it out. They ran out of the house, and they did not stop until they reached the main road. When they turned to look behind them, they saw the house burning with strange blue fire. But there was no smoke. Amid the flames, a pale face appeared with the features of anger and despair, then disappeared with the entire house burning. After the disappearance of the House of the Hands of the Spirit in the Valley of the Shadows, the myths began to surround the place. People were passing by the site, but they could not remember it accurately, as if their memories were erased at the moment of their passage near that valley. However, despite the disappearance of the house, strange phenomena continued to hover around the place. In 1930, the young Jack, who had grew up in the city adjacent to the deserted house, returned to Wadi al-Zalal to search for answers. He had heard many stories about the events that occurred in that place, and he felt that there was something that is not interpreted in those forests. He decided to follow these myths himself, and he was carrying a camera and notebook to write everything he saw. On his first night in the forest, he felt something strange in the air. Darkness was thick, and the air was heavy with something invisible. While he was walking through the narrow path between the giant trees, he began to hear light whispers hesitating around him, as if invisible sounds chasing him. "Jack, don't come close. She is watching you." The words came from every direction, without being a person around him. He felt that something heavy approached. When he looked back, he saw thick fog formed behind him, and with him blurry forms appeared around him. These shapes were moving at a strange speed, and his eyes can be in terror. While he was trying to run, he felt as if his hands were tied to invisible ropes, and the trees around him began to move as if they were close to him. Suddenly, he felt something heavy on his chest, as if a hidden hand tried to strangle him. His heart dived into his chest, but he gathered his powers and took a deep breath, while the wandering souls were screaming in his ear. While he was almost losing consciousness, he suddenly felt very coldly sweeping his body, and his eyes met in a frightening way that appeared in front of him. There was a spectrum of a pale face. Her eyes are full of anger and sadness, surrounded by her long black hands that shine as if they were made of the darkness itself. "Stay away from the Valley of the Shadows, Jack, before it became part of the story," the woman whispered in his ear, with a voice that storms in his depths. With all his strength, Jack ran away from those dark creatures, following the sound that was screaming inside him not to turn. After hours of continuous running, he reached a nearby village, panting in fear and exhaustion. He told the residents what he saw, but they just looked at him and said to him, "I went through what others have gone before." That night, Jack was sleeping in his room, and his eyes were open, watching the ceiling, and quiet sounds filled his ear. Every time he was deceived by fatigue, he felt the whispers in his heart, as if she was inviting him to return to the Valley of Shadows. At that moment, Jack was completely understanding. The souls of the place were forcing him to return to be part of their eternal story. Years have passed, and Jack no longer appears anywhere. And when some went to the same place to search for it, they found nothing but thick fog that hurts the Valley of the Shadows, and endless whispers calling on anyone who dares to approach to be part of the next story.